Hey, my name is Caitlin Conover, and I will be assessing equality around us. This is my equality research project. The purpose of this research project is to determine the amount of actual physical print space devoted to female sport compared to that devoted to male sport. Prior to reading a newspaper, I read 3 peer-reviewed journals that covered the topic of this research assignment. According to one of the peer-reviewed journals, studies on sports media coverage have found a meager female presence since sportswomen have been excluded or sidelined in the media, especially in routine news coverage, but also during major events such as the Olympic Games. All 3 of these peer-reviewed journals I read seem to be on a pretty similar side, that the female presence was pretty meager in the sports media compared to men's team, and it wasn't anywhere near what it should be. However, even after reading these 3 journals, I was under the impression that women are still portrayed pretty equal compared to men in the media. I had never even noticed any difference between them. And I figured that these journals were just outdated and that this information was from about 10 years ago. And so therefore, I looked into a newspaper that had been posted within the week and had a lot of varying articles. The newspaper that I decided to look into was the Idaho Statesman. It's a pretty popular newspaper in Idaho that has been around for many years. It's a local newspaper that features news about sports, politics, general news in Idaho, and I decided to do this one because I'd always read it. Even when I was a kid, I'd read it with my grandpa. We had the actual physical print of it, whereas now you usually just read it online. So I chose this one for this research assignment, and I looked into the sports section and determine the amount of actual physical print space that was devoted to female sport compared to that was devoted to male sport. In order to collect this data, I looked into all the trusted peer-reviewed journals that was over in EBSCOhost, and I looked up all the media, and I browsed quite a few. And then I also looked at that one newspaper. I actually even scrolled through a couple other ones that I found on the internet. It's just Idaho Statesman seems like the best since it's all local. And so I was able to read the conclusions that these authors had found through their studies. And while reading the Idaho Statesman paper, I counted the number of male sports team features versus the female sport team features. I also compared the average length of these articles and the number of photos that were in each one. And so in my images, you can see a little pie chart, and what I got from that, so that's based off the Idaho Statesman paper. When I was first looking through it, I thought that it was pretty equal, like the men and female ratio, and then I counted them, and I counted that there were a total of 7 women team articles, and there were about 18 articles that included men that were featured. So this gave about 28% were featuring women, and then 72% were going to be featuring men. And so what I did notice with the photos is that all of the athletes were wearing their uniform, and they were also in action, whether they were cheering or they were playing. And the Idaho Statesman only uses 1 photo per article, so there wasn't very huge range of numbers going on there. And the length was also pretty similar, it covered the scores, it covered the game highlights and more, so that was super awesome to see that they were equal. And so I have quite a few pictures over here, and I'll get into those when I dig into the results section of this research assignment. And so in that results section, I've got, based on the peer-reviewed article, female athletes were not presented as competent athletes compared to male athletes in the media. Female athletes have been portrayed in ways that emphasize feminineness, femininity, and sexuality when it comes to athletics. As I was looking into sports news from the past week, I was greatly surprised to see that it was almost entirely made up of just men's sports. And I think that a big reason of that is that most of the audience of sports is men. I mean, there are still a lot of women that look into a whole bunch of other sports. It's just generally men are most interested in it. However, I didn't expect that it was going to be this drastic. I always thought that it was pretty equal. I have noticed a big difference in how photos have been portrayed within the past 10 years or so and how they are today. So, in those pictures that I have earlier, we can see down at the bottom, we have the Carolina school. So, we have softball and we have baseball. And what I noticed, so I actually got these images off of one of the peer review journals. This one has women in black dresses, and then this other one has men in action. So I noticed that was quite different because, the women are being portrayed as very feminine. They're wearing their dress or wearing their heels. You don't see them in action a lot. And so the men are really in action. And so, but then when I looked into the Idaho Statesman paper, I could see that, it looks almost exactly the same. Both the photos almost look identical to what both the genders had. They're cheering, they're wearing like similar clothes, and the women are not wearing dresses or heels. They're in action, they're playing the game, they're in the sport. So I thought that was super awesome to see. And for my conclusion, Title I-X was established in the U.S. in 1972, and it ensured that men and women would have fair participation opportunities as well as scholarships in sports programs. Since UNESCO recognized sports and physical activity as a human right, communities have come a very long way to pursuing gender equality in sports. However, it is still very important and imperative that gender equality and equality in general should be studied, because even prior I hadn't thought that women were shown a lot less within the sports media compared to those of men. So that's why it was super awesome to get to do this research for this assignment, because now I know that obviously it's not portrayed the same way. Whether our local is a little bit better than some of the other places, and it does vary from place to place, but it has drastically changed, but it's still important to remain aware of these issues that we have. And then right below are just all my references for the peer review journal and the newspaper. And thank you for listening to my research project.